You're going to hang it in the post office wall?
What?
You're going to hang that pictures in the post office wall? That's where they hang all the wanted people.
So we ask that you rephrase the question in your answer. So
If you don't mind, you have to speak a little bit louder.
When we ask you a question, can you repeat the question before you answer? So if we ask what your name is, say
I
my
understand.
name is. Okay. So what is your name?
Name is Arthur Gelbart. Arthur Abram Gelbart.
Okay, so is it sir?
Are we good? All right. Who would like?
I can start, I guess. Okay.
First, should we just tell them our names?
Yeah, well, I'm Simona Baskin.
Hi, I'm Elijah Sokoloff. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so we met you at the door.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
How are you?
Hi, I'm Atara Pollack.
Hi.
I'm Atara Pollack.
How are you? Good to
How are
meet
you?
you. Yeah, we're fine.
Charlie Wassman. Is there anything you'd like to start off with before we ask our individual questions?
Just I'm 88 years old, and I'll be 89 next month. And I'm very happy to be here to be of any kind of help. We have done those things before a lot. We do speak to a lot of children in the temple, and we kind of like to do that. And we're still able to do it.
Where were you when the war was going on?
When the war started, I was 10 years old, and I was at home with a very large family. We're a very happy, big family. We all lived within walking distance of everybody. It's a small town, and I was going till then. I was going to school to a cheder, and you know what a cheder is, right?
Yes.
And I was going to the Polish school, so a half and half most the whole day. And until the war came in 1939 in September. Then school stopped. We were not allowed to go to school. My mother was very much into getting for us an education. You have to remember it was a small town, not much available. So she hired somebody privately to come into the house. I had 3 sisters and myself. And we all were trying to catch up on what we didn't get in school for the education, and we were semi-Orthodox. Everybody in Europe at the time was Orthodox. There was only one way to go, and we had a very nice life. Not very wealthy, but we lived very well, and we had until then a very good education. 2 of my sisters were older than I was. We were all 2 years apart. And my younger sister and myself, she was 8 and I was 10. We're trying to catch up with everybody. And we were a very happy family. We didn't know too much of luxury, but we were very close-knit. I had grandparents and very good life, really. It was not. And then it kind of slowed down. It all became where my father had to go to work, which he didn't like very much because nobody cared for the Germans. But like I said, I was only 10 years old, and we were running away in the beginning to go away when the Germans were coming in. And my father sent the three of us away to a friend's house, and they were going to catch up to us, but it didn't last very long because the Germans caught up with us and passed us. So we couldn't do anything, but the 3 of us, my older sister and my younger sister and myself, decided to go back home. So we started walking back home. We were not allowed to walk at night, so we walked as much as we could and stayed on the side of the road at night until we came home. And when we came home, we found out. You want me to speak about the Holocaust, right? The part
Yeah.
that one of my uncles was shot the first day when the Germans came in. They just kind of set an example to the town to show their power. So when we walked into the house, my parents were very, very happy that we came. But it was like very sad because my uncle that was shot had 3 children and his wife were in our house. They didn't want to stay at their home. So this is where we stayed for quite a while until they started taking us to work, and not the children, but they took my father. And that was going on for about a year and a half, and then they moved us into a ghetto. You heard of that one, right? So where we exchanged houses with the Polish people. We gave them our house, and it so happened they gave us back a room for my mother, and my father already was sent away to work camp, and my grandparents, my mother's parents. So we all stayed in one big room, and this is where we stayed in the ghetto. And then a few months, then the news came around that they're going to close that ghetto, eliminate it. So we all went to the next city, not far from us. It was like 10 miles away. It was a big city in Poland and called Częstochowa. This is where their holy shrine was. And people would go there every year to pray, the non-Jews. So my mother took the 4 of us, and we moved into that town in Częstochowa. Again, we settled in I remember one room and a little kitchen. This is where we stayed. My grandparents, my mother's parents, were not able to go anymore. They didn't feel good. So we left them behind, and of course they were shot. They didn't make it. And then we stayed in Częstochowa for another 6-7 months, and it was like in 1941. The war broke out in 1939. So in about 41, then it was right where Yom Kippur, about that time. So my mother again, she was an educated woman, very wise. She was. I have a picture of her here, my wife has. She took us and sent us one at a time back to the place where we came from. That was not anymore, nobody was there, but they had a work camp. So my 2 sisters and I stayed in that work camp, and we worked every day. By that time I was already like 11 and a half years old. But we worked every day, tearing down houses, building roads. And one thing that I remember vaguely is they had me work on the Jewish cemetery, where we would break up the stones and they would build roads with them. The material from the stones, we build roads with them, and this is what I was doing. So then we stayed in that place for about 6 months, and then they packed us up by a train and sent us to a camp called Blechhammer, which is a division of Auschwitz. It's just about 50 kilometers away. And this is a place that they use to segregate the people, to decide where they should go and what they should do with them. There was a German that came, and he is the one that made the decision. So my 3 sisters were there, and they packed them up and sent them to a woman's work camp. But when the time came, and all of the older people and the children and the people that couldn't, right from there, they sent them to Auschwitz. And that was, of course, the death camp. Remember it vaguely, the trucks came back empty with their clothes, and we kind of saw what was going on. Am I doing okay?
Yeah,
You're doing great.
So when the time came to select us, I still am short, and I was small. I was very small, but I always skinny. And they usually selected people that could work. So when we were on the place where the decision was made and the guy was selecting, some of my friends spoke up and they said that I was a very good worker. And they took my hands and showed it to the Germans as calluses from working. And so they decided to leave us live. So there were 5 boys about my age at that time. At that time, I was already 13 years old. My father from camp, before that, sent a letter to my mom somehow, not to forget that I have to be bar mitzvah. And my grandfather at the time took me, but we couldn't make it because we were not allowed to pray. So we were like what they call a shtibel, as one room where they had a Sefer Torah, and I said the prayers, but no, that's it. We had to leave right away. So that was my bar mitzvah. So they're kidding me now because a few months ago I was bar mitzvah at the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. So I kind of went through it 77 years later. But we stayed in that camp, and my friends hid me and the 4 other boys in the bathroom because they were afraid the Germans were going to change their mind and take us and send us to Auschwitz. But as it turned out, it kind of quieted down. So I stayed in that camp for about a year and a half, working the same way, building roads and building I was, to stay safe, you had to, because of my age and size, I had to produce. I just felt I had to produce. And there we were a year and a half in that camp. And then I remember vaguely, it's already so long ago, but one day I walked into the camp, and whenever they walked us back from work, there were 2 gates. One is the main gate where we could walk in normally, and the other one was a gate when there was a punishment involved for people and they want us to witness it. And that was the hardest thing to see. Virtually, they walked us in there and there was a hanging, and they hang quite a few people for doing things that, like stealing a piece of bread or doing things like that. And and one time when I was at work, one of the Germans, it was not a soldier, a civilian worker, gave me a piece of bread to take back to camp. And I remember I put it in my ear and I tried to hide it. But when I walked to the gate, they noticed it. So they took me out and kind of beat me up a little bit. I lost a bunch of my teeth. And then they gave me 20 lashes. And I was only that time about 13, 14 years old. But we survived that. And we lived there. And a lot of my friends and a lot of people from my hometown were there too. Until about December of 1944, when we could hear already the Russian machine guns and the shooting and the tanks were getting close by. So they packed us up, or and that was, winter in Europe was very cold. It was cold enough for the snow on the sidewalks to freeze so we could ice skate on it. That's how cold it was. We packed up whatever we had, which is not much in belongings, and we marched out from the camp, which was 4,000 of us, 4,000 prisoners. And we started marching, of course. We didn't know where we were going. And we marched for 2 weeks. The main result was it was a very, very tough. They didn't march us out just to place us in a different place. They marched us out mainly, they thought that was the only way they could kill and get rid of as many as they could. It was not a very pleasant march, because first of all, we had no clothing, was not good. We had the stripes on and not very good shoes. We wound up walking with burlap on our feet. And as somebody would sit down or lay down that couldn't walk anymore, they would shoot him. And there was one German in particular, I think he did most of the shooting. It's amazing. He was one of the prisoners of the camp. During the day we walked, and then about 6, 7 o'clock we would very little or no food, all of us. We would stop someplace like in a farm place, but we would, of course, not go inside. We would be in the barn or outside. That was every night. But we were losing a lot of people. One morning, I remember we passed by and said Lange Billau. That was the work camp that my sisters were in. It said 4 kilometers. I was that close to them. And of course, we couldn't go there, and we couldn't stop, or we couldn't do anything. We just kept on walking until we arrived in Gross-Rosen, a camp of Gross-Rosen, which was also a distributing camp. From there, they decided what to do with us. It was already January that time. We marched for 2 weeks like that in that weather. So this is when we arrived to Gross-Rosen. They did not even have any more barracks, so we slept in tents with the ground. There was mud that was a death camp, really. But we arrived to there with 1,500 of us out of the 4,000. So they did their job. We stayed there there was no food. What they did is every day a wagon would pass by and throw a piece of bread at people, whoever could catch it. There was sometimes they gave us a soup which consisted of like a grassy type stuff with nothing in it. That was it. There in that place, we were there for 2 weeks. Then they loaded us up, the same people that we came there, and put us on a train to send us to Buchenwald. That was one of the famous, that was really the first concentration camp that Hitler built in 1933. Originally it was for communists and prisoners and stuff like that, a war camp. So, but on the way there for about 2 or 3 days on an open train, there was no luxury. We were completely open, and we were all like a cattle train. We arrived at a town like Weimar, which was like 10 kilometers away from the camp Buchenwald. It was the main station. We arrived there, and we were at the train station to get off because we had to walk the rest of the place. the British planes came, they thought that was a German transport train. And when the German guards that were there with us, they ran into the woods to hide, and the bombs fell right where we were. There was a bomb that fell, I would say, maybe 10 feet from the wagon where I was. And it dug up all the mud in the ground that I was covered about that far in that stuff. When it stopped, my friends, whoever was left, dug me out, but I was very badly damaged. I couldn't walk, I had my feet my veins were cut. So we couldn't complain to the Germans that we needed a doctor, because that meant one thing. They didn't save anybody that couldn't walk. So my friends, if you believe it or not, they took a wet rag and urine, human urine, and put it on my, like, compresses. Supposedly that was supposed to help. Then we walked the 10 kilometers into the camp, and we came to the Camp Buchenwald again. You probably heard, this is the same place where Eli Wiesel was. He was in the same barracks with me. I didn't know him. He was like a year older, but we were in a children's barrack with all the children, in Barrack 66. And this is where we stayed. And then every day they would take us to the Appellplatz. Now, Buchenwald was not a gas, they didn't gas people, but there were ovens. They had about 6 or 8 ovens where they would do the people that died. And there were stacks of people right next to those ovens, waiting to be burned. Every morning we took on that Appellplatz, whoever they decided to take out and ship him to a different camp. It was always the walking, the marching. This is how they eliminated a lot of people. So whoever did not leave that day, we went back to our barrack. And the next day, same thing again. Until they walked out quite a few thousand. Buchenwald had about 40,000 prisoners. And they're coming and going. And then you would sometimes come across people that I knew, or they knew me, if we recognized each other. I mean, I probably, with our weight over here, I was probably in the vicinity of 65 pounds. Because I was short and skin redwood. And maybe that's why I survived, because I really never worried too much. You didn't worry about tomorrow. You worried about making the day today. You didn't save any food for the next day because there was very little. So this is how we kept going, but some people just gave up. You would wake up in the morning in Buchenwald. They had those bunks. I don't know if you've seen them. They have them in the Holocaust Museum in Washington. Like, there were 3 high, and they put 6 of us in one of those. You'd wake up in the morning, and the kid next to you was dead. You didn't know that. You pulled them out. They gave us another one. That's the way life was. People just don't realize that. And this is how we lived there for back and forth, where a lot of them they took out. They didn't take many kids out. They took mostly the adults and sent them like to Dachau and all of those other camps. And we were there, and that went on from February, March, and part of April. But the Americans were getting close to the camp, and we could hear the guns and the shooting, and there was a lot of resistance. The Germans gave him a lot of resistance. And the Germans, while this was going on, were shooting into the barracks. So we were, by the older people there, we were told to lay on the floor, under the table or something, not to be exposed. So this is how, in then April 11, I remember like today, is when somebody walked in from, they couldn't find the door because like low class type barracks, walked in through the window. And he says, a rabbi, he says, you are free, we took over the camp. And that was a shock. And that's when they freed the camp. So it's not easy. And then the American Red Cross took all the children and they put us into the barracks where the German guards were. They didn't want us to overeat, because that was the worst thing you could do for your system. People died. There were about 5,000 people that died every day after the liberation because of that. They run into town and they grabbed anything and they eat anything. But they took us to those barracks, the children. By that time I was already, April 11th, so I was already 16 years old. And they fed us the cereals and all of that stuff, which we didn't like, but they saved our lives. And then I still didn't know anything of my sisters or anybody, my mother or father survived. We didn't know anything of that. But my friends that were shipped out from that camp, somehow when the camps were liberated, had a car. They took a car or stole a car, whatever, and they came into camp and they looked for people they knew, and they found me. So I went with them and left Buchenwald to start looking for family. So we would go to a city and they would have a board that you can hang up. I am here, Arthur Gelbart, I'm alive and I'm looking for family. So if somebody else came in and recognized the name, this is how we found each other. And that was going on for quite a long time because nobody knew what was happening. And we drove and we went all over Germany. We went into the English zone, British zone, we went to the French zone. And then one day I went to, when we lived in a city in Bayreuth, one day I walk out the street and I was a kid, you know, I was 16 years old, but I never went through childhood, really. We were, the years between 10 and 16, those are valuable lives, years. And I saw my sister walking down the street. Sorry. She found out that I was there and she came. And then she took me and we went to my other sisters. And we were there in Germany for a while and we drove around all over the place looking for more people. But there was no hope. There was no hope. We found out that my mother was shot right in the ghetto. And my father died in Auschwitz. So we stayed there for quite a while, and then there was an organization called UNRWA that was for people, displaced people without parents. So my younger sister and I, she was 14 and I was 16, they took us right near Munich to a camp for children to be registered and go to the United States. So this is what happened. We came to the United States in April of '47, 2 years later. And then in '48, I enlisted in the American Army. Because I couldn't speak very little English. Okay, hello, something like that, that's all. And I wanted to learn. Go ahead.
What language did you speak before?
Well, Yiddish and Polish. We went to both the school, Yiddish. The language at home was Yiddish. And in Polish because we were educated in a Polish school half of the time.
You said you
So
lived.
that's the only languages we could speak. My wife is a different story. She was younger. She was 6 years younger. So she was really she was a hidden child. For those 3-4 years, she was hidden from one place to the other. And there was this Polish woman that acted like her sister and really saved her. But with the Holocaust survivor, it's different. We matured overnight. We got old at the age of 14 or 12. So then we stayed there when we came to this country, the two of us, and my sisters since then married. No, I'm okay. They got married and they both had a child in 1947 as we were leaving. And then being in the Army, I was authorized to bring them over. And we filled out papers and we brought them over. And by then, we found my grandmother's sister lived in Cleveland. This is how we wound up in Cleveland. And she had 3 more sisters in New York, but we came here because she was the youngest. And my sister and I stayed there for a few months. Then the agency found us a boarding room. And I went to the service of the Army for 2 years. My sister graduated high high. And I went to high high for exactly 30 days. Because I had to go to work. Because there was really we came here exactly, to be honest with you, we were given $1 each. So they had on the boat, on the ship that we came on, they would open up a little door, it was like a PX, and you could buy a Coke there. So my sister and I went there and we each spent $1 nickel to buy a Coke. But we drank the same bottle. We didn't want to spend the money. So the next day she used her nickel. But we came a long way, and once the families were here, we kind of blossomed out. And when I came home from the service, I went to work. And I've worked ever since, and that was in 1950 when I came out of the service. That time I was already, 18, 20 years old. 21. And then I went to work, and we've worked ever since.
Where do you work?
I met my wife in 1954 or 53, something. She knows all the dates. And then we got married in 55. We raised two sons and four grandchildren. They skipped town and left for California. But the nice thing about all of this is the 4 of us, my 3 sisters and I, have raised 40 people in our family right now.
Where do you work now? Where do you go to work?
Well, I was selling beauty supplies because my uncle, my aunt that brought us over, that's the kind of business he was. My first paycheck was $27 for a week. But I wanted my sister to get an education. She wanted to be a beautician. So I went to my uncle and I said, it costs $200 to teach her to be a beautician. I said, I want you to give me the $200 and give me like a passport, and I'll give you $5 every week for my salary. And he wanted to more or less for us to handle money. And that's what I did. She graduated, she became a hairstylist specialist. And she raised, and they all got married and raised children, and we're doing great from it.
What was your relationship to religion throughout?
To who?
To religion, like Judaism, throughout all your experiences?
I'm going to be very honest to you. There wasn't much religion going on during the war. When we were children raised, we were Orthodox, of course. My father was a butcher. He was selling kosher meat. So consequently, every Shabbos, everybody, Friday night, Friday afternoon, we would go to the mikveh. And my father with my father, and we enjoyed that. We spent a lot of family together. Saturday, we went to shul till noon, and then we would go home. I remember Friday afternoons, my mother would make a chunt. You know what that is, right?
Of course.
And I had to carry it to the baker, because this is where we put it in the oven for overnight. And I still wonder how I recognized the pot. There were so many pots over there. Everybody brought a chunt. And then Saturday when we came from the temple, I would pick it up, and this is what we ate. And it's usually, we always came home with somebody additional that didn't have. There were always people in the temple or the synagogue that didn't have a home and needed to eat. So there was a lot of poor people at that time. There are not many of them. We were not. You know, the clothes I was getting, I was the only child, the only boy in the family, right? A pair of short pants for Passover. That was it. Never got. My older sister got new clothes every year, but then my other two sisters got it from her. So there was not extravagant. There was not a lot of spending. We lived very peaceful. We have to remember, if I was hungry and my mother didn't have anything right there, I would go to my grandmother and eat. It was right down the street. And some of that life, believe me, I would take it any time. And also, the religion part, that kind of disappeared then. When we went to camps and all that, we tried. If you remember the Yortzeit, we tried to, but other than that, there was no praying around. It wasn't allowed, and we couldn't do it. So consequently, to be very honest with you, I didn't learn more about religion until I came to this country. And I was already 16 years of age. I was a member of the Green Road Synagogue, and I know most of your parents that were there for 20 years.
How did you feel about Germany? Did it feel like less like home after the war, and you just wanted to leave, or did it still feel like your house?
No, I was there a couple times. I went back with my wife, and I took my two sons to Poland, one at a time. We wanted them to see where we're from. We're in my hometown, and there was a very good experience. But this is a different generation. I don't think I hate the German people. That was a madman that did that, and believe me, and they're paying for it right then. And he was strictly the one. The main thing that is disturbing, they were a very educated land, very educated country. Their kids and everybody, they were professional. And how they let that happen, that's the problem. But we have to live with it, we can't hate. But we go back and we pay for it a lot. with dreams. We dream a lot. I do an awful lot about the camps. But you have to remember, this is already 70 some years later.
So if you had to blame someone, it would be.
Pardon me?
If you don't feel any grudges against any.
If I had to go what?
You don't have any grudges against any of the.
No.
Nazis.
No.
Can you state the question in your answer?
I can't hear that.
Can you state the question in your answer?
The question is what?
Can you state the question in your answer?
I can't. Can I state your question?
In your answer. Can you say if you hold any grudges?
No, I don't think I do.
No, state the question when you answer.
I don't understand.
Could you please say that you don't hold any grudges, just so they could get it for the video?
I see. I
Thank you.
definitely do not hold any grudges. No. First of all, it's a different generation, different country, and whatever I do, God always said you have to forgive. Because if you don't forgive and forget, you're only hurting yourself. The main reason, with all of this going on, I had almost no education. I was 3 years in school, from age 7 to age 10. That was it. I missed that. I could have gone to college and all when I came out of the Army. I was allowed to do that. But we had to go to work. We had to raise families. I know most of your parents, most of them in here. I've lived in Cleveland for over 70 years.
Anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I had a question. I was wondering, did you live in Poland or did you live in Germany?
Poland. We were born in Poland. We were born in Poland, a town called Kłobuck, which was only 10 miles from the big city of Częstochowa. It's a beautiful city, by the way. We used to walk it a lot.
Have you ever been back to
Yeah,
Poland?
I took my sons there one at a time. My first visit was when it was occupied by Russia, and they put me into jail because I went to the school that I went to for the 3 years, and I wanted my son, Michael, to see where I went to the school. And the Russians came and arrested me. They thought I was a spy or whatever. And then I was back again. I was in Warsaw, where my wife is from. And I was in Auschwitz. I went back to Poland.
Just wait 1 sec for them to finish the announcements.
Pardon me?
Wait 1 second so they can finish the announcements. So.
I can't hear him, whatever.
I'm not sure what they're saying either.
I'm serious.
All right. You guys have any questions?
You can go.
Yeah. How did you meet your wife?
Pardon me?
How did you meet your wife?
When I came out of the Army in 1950, I lived in East Cleveland, like Whitmore Avenue, Lakeview, and all that area where the Jewish people lived. And there was a bakery. This is where there was a bakery. There was a Fairport bakery. And my brother-in-law came home one day and he says, I saw this girl that works for that bakery. I said, Art, he says, you got to go there and meet her. So I did, and that was it. No, what happened is she graduated high school and she asked me to take her out to the prom. So I took her out to the prom, and I was 6 years older. So she at the time was 19 and I was 25. And then we got married, I think a year later, because this is when we got married, I was 26. One of my sons is, by the way, a psychiatrist in California, very proud. And Michael is a psychologist. And my wife is both, psychiatrist and psychologist. But We have a nice sized, beautiful family. Would you believe it? I have one grandson that's 6'7" and one is 6'3".
Wow.
That's 7. That's so.
Yeah, and my younger one just graduated San Diego University, the college.
How did the war and all your experiences change your outlook on humanity?
I think mostly you appreciate life more. You appreciate and you appreciate what you have more. Your demands are different. I love people. I'm a salesman all my life. And the people that built this place, Bob Stark, I did most of his work, flooring. Then I went into the flooring business. I did most of their work. Bob Stark and what's his name? His uncle. The name is the school name. Who built the school?
Leonard Fuchs? Fuchs?
Yeah, Leonard.
Yeah.
I know the men very well. When we came to this country in 47, 48, he was one of us. We were in a group like that. We used to hang out together. He's a wonderful man. And Susan Fuchs, I don't know if you know her. Very good friends of ours.
Very nice.
And we know almost everybody in Cleveland.
Do you have any questions?
But I should have worn my hearing aids. I can't hear very well.
Yeah, we'll speak louder. We'll speak louder.
But no, you're doing fine. She's too soft.
Does your experience from the Holocaust, do you think about it every day?
Did I what?
Do you think about your experience in the Holocaust every day and the memories?
A little less right now. You know, when the kids were growing up, we tried to save them that grief. And my son he's very big into the movies. He made a video of the four of us about 12 years ago. And we always constantly talk about it, but when we were raising the kids, we didn't want them to go through all this. So a lot of times we would talk in Polish or Yiddish, so they won't understand it. And it turns out right now that they knew it. They knew it. The kids, my two sons always said, we went to Beechwood High School in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He says, we knew that we were children of Holocaust survivors. So I said, how did you feel about it? We didn't want them to feel sorry for us. So we tried to keep away some of that stuff from them. We never discussed in the front of them with my sisters the camps. But then my wife became an interviewer of the Holocaust. She interviewed about 30 people in this Cleveland with the tapes. We all made tapes, which are great. But it's always with us.
Has it affected any part of your life? Like in the future, like now?
In a way, I don't know how I would have been different if I would not have gone through that. So I can't tell that. I know that was the life we had. The type we have right now, we have to live with that. It affected us, yes. I know one thing, my wife brought my picture. My father was very tall. I never made it because I think a lot of it had to do with that. If you were on a diet to what we were at age 12 and 13, and with just enough nourishment.
I have a question. So did both of you had 3 sisters, right?
Yeah.
So did they all come to Cleveland?
We were all 4 of us here. One of them just passed away 2 years ago. My second sister. But we all came here, and all our families were raised right here in Cleveland.
Sure.
How did you move on from the war? Like, how did you mentally prepare yourself to continue your life afterwards?
How did I what?
How did you mentally prepare yourself to move on after the war?
How prepared?
No, how did you mentally prepare yourself?
Always look at the bright side of life. You can't live on what happened in the past, because it only makes you and everybody around you very happy. We raised our two sons. I was very active with them. Took them to sports and ball games and all of that. We just didn't want them to be involved with the Holocaust survivors only. We were. I was the president for a while for Call Israel Foundation. My wife was the president for 5 years, and my wife right now is part of the child survivors of the Holocaust, which is thousands of members of children that survived the hidden children. She represents Cleveland, and she's on the board of New York, on the main board. And she's very active with that. I am not as active, because at my age, I think I've slowed down a little bit.
How did you have the courage to wake up every morning and continue your life?
How do I what?
How did you have the courage every morning to wake up and to continue and not give up?
Because don't look at the past. You look at what's ahead of you. And you try to, again, I never use an alarm clock. You wake up, I really love getting up in the morning and doing things. And when my kids come to town, we just 2 weeks ago went to a wedding of one of my nieces into Tampa, Florida, when all 40 of us were there. That is what I appreciate. Family.
Have you had any hobbies when growing up, or even once you got to America? Did you?
Yeah, my hobby was working. I enjoyed working. I really enjoy people, and I still enjoy right now being involved in it.
How do you think people should continue your legacy of being a Holocaust survivor? And how long did it take you to share your story?
Well, I'm very much into that the second and third generation should be active, because that's the only way. This is why we go to the temples and the B'nai. Right now I'm a member of B'nai Shur. And we talk to children, and most of them are non-Jewish children, because this is eventually going to disappear, where there's just a few of us. So you like to, as much as possible, talk about it and have our children involved. My younger son, Michael, which is right now 57 years old, he's very active. And he's into that. You should see the stuff he puts in on my cell phone with all the pictures and all of this stuff. It's people like that have to continue, and not necessarily, but see that it doesn't die with us.
Yeah. What would you say were your most vivid memories as a child, like growing up in the ghettos and in the camps?
The vivid, we talked about it when I marched in Blachame and they were hanging. The vivid when you see your friend next to you in a march getting shot and there's nothing you can do about it. The punishments, that's the most thing that we have to get over with, which you can't. It's there.
Do you have any scars, like from, what is it called? Like from getting lashed or lashes?
Then, but I was young, you know, we had, I think they gave me 15 or 20 lashes, but my teeth never grew back. But that was at the time, in a way, that's the way you look at it. When I got my lashes and I knocked my teeth out, they could have shot me, because that was against the law to bring in bread from the war. And many people, they did. So you can't say that I feel good about it. But that's what you have to look at, the brighter side of it. You see, in the morning, you get up in the morning, like in that Gross Rosen camp. The fences were all electrocuted. Why? You see people that just give up. That's something that lives in your mind. It's hard to get rid of.
Do you believe or think that everything happens for a reason?
No.
Why?
A madman, there was no reason. What was it? Anybody tried to teach us a lesson? Why? Do you realize that out of the 6 million Jewish people that died in Europe, 1.5 million were children? Why? So nothing happens for anybody's good. It's just, it's happening right now too. We don't do much about it. Like a guy in Florida goes in and kills 19 children, and I mean, it's, it's up to the people that run. No reason to have a repeating rifle like this available to somebody that is not well. God forbid.
So I know you spoke about this a little bit before, but what would you say is our responsibility as, grandchildren of Holocaust survivors to continue on?
Don't forget. If you forget, then our life was wasted.
What was the biggest sacrifice that you had to do in order to survive?
We had to usually just be selfish enough and not worry about the next people, because everybody's, we were, we didn't worry. I didn't. I can only tell you, I never worried about not enough food. There's nothing I can do about it. I had a slice of bread a day, and a soup for lunch, and a soup for dinner. That's what we had to live with. We did some praying. There was, of course, there were rabbis amongst us, but it was all done in a very. It was not open that we could do that and enjoy it. We just couldn't. So consequently, when I survived, and I couldn't even daven. I never had the opportunity until when I came and started going to Green Road Synagogue in B'nai Shore. And my kids became bar mitzvah. They went to Taylor Road Synagogue, which was an Orthodox temple. Did you?
No, it's right down the street from where I live.
Yeah. And they raised their children but more modern. We cannot blame them. We cannot all be exactly Orthodox. And I do a lot of work, by the way, in the yeshiva and Taylor Road to those people that live there, flooring.
Was there anyone that you met when you were in the ghetto or a camp that you kept in touch with because you got close with them?
Not really. Very few survive, and the ones that did, we have to remember, we were young, so they were older, and they're gone. A lot of them went to Israel, which I visited and I saw them. A lot of them are my age, a lot of children went to England and France. Like Eli Wiesel he was shipped from my place to France, and a lot of them went into England. And a lot of, this is where we scattered all over, and an awful lot of them went to Israel. And a lot of those young boys that went to Israel at the time were going to the army, and they didn't make it either. They didn't have any, they were given a gun and go, that's it.
You mentioned how you didn't speak the same language, but also going through all these experiences. When you actually arrived in the United States, was it difficult for you to have human interactions? Like,
Did I what?
Was it difficult for you to have interactions with other people?
Well, it was already 2 years later, and we were busy raising a family, and we were all. My outlook was always positive, and that's one big reason to survive. You can't worry about what happened yesterday. You got to live for the next, and we've become selfish about that. But it's a fact. We did. I mean, if I was given a slice of bread in the afternoon in camp, and the fellow next to me, that wasn't enough for him. I wasn't that educated to give him part of my bread. You were living to survive that day. So there was not that much help.
Was it challenging to reconnect?
Pardon me?
Was it challenging to reconnect with God once you came back to like America?
Was it what?
Challenging to reconnect with God?
To reconnect with God?
Yeah.
No, really not, because by being in the Green Road Synagogue for 20 years, you were with God, all right. And this is what we were. All the people that built this here were members of the Green Road Synagogue. Rabbi Granatstein, of course, was our rabbi for years. We enjoyed it a lot because it was like a family thing. But things and times change when you grow in families. They spread out. We have all, and right now it is very hard for us to get the whole family together, work together on a computer. With all of this stuff, they go in there. I can't even watch half of the stuff. There's too much.
So once you came to Cleveland and your life began to settle down, did you ever think about moving to Israel?
I love Israel. We were there. I was there 4 times. My wife was there 6 or 7 times. We just were there. What was it? November. Yeah, November. We had a gathering of the children of the Holocaust. There was 400 people. And then my wife and I were both bar mitzvah at the Wailing Wall. So, and that was great, because really I never really went through that. And it was right at the wall, and we went through the prayers, and then they took us upstairs, and they gave us a big luncheon and all that. It was a very good experience. But we love Israel, but we can't all live there. I still have first cousins that live in Israel. And this is how we're spread like that all over. I have cousins in Australia. I have. Or after the war, this is what happened. Everybody went to different places and built their families. But I could live in Israel anytime. Really, especially in Netanya.
What did you hope to achieve once you made it to the United States, besides for raising a family?
Mostly, we tried to get an education.
I'm just giving you a 15-minute warning, and then we're going to take a group photo.
Most of us wanted to get an education, and that's the mistake that I made. I think I should have gone back to school. That was the one thing I didn't put enough behind it. But when I came out of the Army after 2 years, believe me, I spoke English all right, without even going to school. But I'm still, in a way, my son can't get over it, that I really educated myself an awful lot without going to school. It's called the education of hard knocks. But I get along with my grandchildren very much. We're much into it. I love my grandson that just graduated. He comes to Cleveland every year for 2 weeks and stays with us. And I love them.
At what point did you start to lose hope?
Did I what?
At what point did you start to lose hope? At what point did you start to lose hope during like the Holocaust?
What point did I lose?
At what point did you start to lose hope?
I don't think I didn't hope for the next time, the next day. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived. But sometimes it gets to a point like when we marched, there was 4,000 of us, and you see what's going on, and you see, even though at the time I was only 15 years old, and you see the shootings and the killings and the dying of people that you know. You worry about not losing your hope. You're worried about it, but it's not much you can do about it.
Did you have the opportunity to like write diary entries?
The what?
Did you have the opportunity during your experience to write about it?
I didn't write about it, but I made a very good video on that Holocaust tape. It's a 2-hour thing, and I was told it's one of the best because I describe everything, really what happened in the camps in those 2 years that I was there with kids my own age. That was our life, and I hope your kids carry on with it.
You mentioned how you were in the war. What did you say your job was in the Army?
In the Army?
Yeah.
I was in a signal corps. And I couldn't, there was no war, thanks God, so I was a supply sergeant stationed part of the time in New Jersey and part of the time in Cocoa Beach, Florida, where they were building the guided missiles. You don't go back that far. That was the rockets they sent up in the 50s. So this is what we were building. We were putting the communication in.
So, when you were at Green Road Synagogue and like being back in Cleveland, did you and everyone else at the shul and in the community, did people discuss their experiences in the Holocaust?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes. When the newcomers get together, that's all they talk about. And by the way, you know I have a number too, so you know.
What number were you? Like, did you memorize it?
199171. Oh.
Got some of your pictures.
Yeah, this was.
Was this when you were in Israel?
Is this you?
That's my father in the Polish army.
And who was this?
That was my mother. My wife brought this along.
Can I have a photo of you holding the picture of your mother?
Here,
Do you mind?
I'll hold this.
Sure, thank you.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, beautiful.
There was a picture of the Polish army.
Do you know what year that was? What year?
I wasn't born yet.
Do you know?
Well, this must have been in 1919. This is where he served. And this was my mother before she was married. She was only about 18 or 17 years old. That's the only picture we have.
this from? What is this from?
This is when we go to those Holocaust meetings, the hidden children. You go what country you're from, and we meet together with the people from the same towns. My wife has this. She keeps everything.
Do you want me to take it? Actually, do you want to show these to the camera?
Pardon me?
Can you show these to the camera?
Here, I can hold that for you. I'll hold.
My father was 6 foot tall. My mother was 5 foot tall. Yeah.
How much knowledge did you have about the world outside of the concentration camps during your experiences?
None at all, except when we could hear the shooting when the Russians were getting close. This is when we had hope. And this is when and then also the shooting in Buchenwald in April when the American troops were getting close. So we knew that it's getting close.
What do you think about the 21st century?
You could learn something from the 19th century. I am not impressed what's going on right now. Not at all. Not much we can do about it, but I'm not impressed. In some respect, if you're talking about Jewish life, the life we had in Europe in that little town, did you see Fiddler on the Roof?
Yes.
A lot of it is like that. We were a little bit more modern. But that was the life. We didn't have very much. But we had family.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That was really our pleasure. You got more out of me than anybody.
Thank you. Okay, press this red button.
Me